Hi, good morning, everyone. Just realised I'm waffling away here with my microphone on mute. That's not a very good start to the day, is it? Okay, I do just keep talking as I do when we're doing these presentations. I'll just kind of waffle on a little bit first thing, whilst everyone joins, and by me talking here, it lets you know that you've got to the right place, and hopefully you can adjust your microphone to hear me. If everyone could stay on mute, that'd be fine. I found where the mute button is now, so I can mute you all just with one click of my mouse here, which I have done. As long as you guys don't unmute yourselves. There is a button for that as well. I can stop you unmuting yourselves, but that probably doesn't help for a good discussion at times. So if you want to jump in, you can, but otherwise I'll keep you guys on mute. It's a beautiful morning here. I'm in North Lincolnshire, just down the road from Nornby Park, if any of you know that. And the sun's coming in through my study window here, which is great, except it means one side of my face is really brightly lit and the other side's in quite dark shadow. You get that kind of thing because the sun's coming directly onto me, but it's beautiful out there this morning. I hope it's nice where you guys are as well. I'll continue to admit people here. I did a presentation a couple of days ago on management of deceased records. And I think I was making the point there that I couldn't find the button that just allows you all to bypass the lobby. Well, as you can see, I still haven't found the button that does that. It's pretty pathetic, I know. I'm going to have to go and do some lessons with our development team and our trainers, I think, to work that one out. Otherwise, all I get as I start the presentation is these little pings that tell me someone's waiting in the lobby to get in, and I need to go and admit them, which just gets to be a bit of a hassle. Anyway. So yeah, we were starting in a couple of minutes. It's just gone past. And as I'm sure you can all hear anyway, there are still people coming into the lobby, so we'll just give it another couple of minutes. Okay. Oh, that's good. I can see my colleagues Emma has arrived and is able to put people through to the lobby. That's great. That saves me having to do it. So let's get my presentation. Find my presentation up. We'll be making a start in a couple of minutes. There we go. Okay. If I could just ask everyone to go on mute, I can just hear, because I can't see the mute button now, which has disappeared. Hopefully, oh, can someone just confirm that they can see that first slide of my presentation?
I can see.
Great, thank you very much. Appreciate that. Excellent. So I make it just 32. I'll give it 1 more minute and then we'll get started. But I'll start waffling on anyway. So this is an information governance brief. My name is Barry Jackson, Head of Information Governance at N3i. Data Protection Officer for the majority of the practices around here. But that's irrelevant in terms of this. This is part of the information governance service that you all get. It's not specific to the DPO role. Everyone's welcome to this presentation, and it can be spread as far and wide as you like. The presentation itself has been recorded, and at the end of it, probably by this afternoon, I will aim to have the presentation available on our IG portal for you to, if anyone wants to review it. I'll have the webinar itself, so there'll be a recording of the webinar, and in this case, I'm going to actually put the presentation, the PowerPoint presentation, because I've got a lot of links in the presentation to useful resources and so on. So you'll be able to access those resources when I put the presentation up. So, okay, let's make a start. This won't take too long this morning, I think. There is some stuff here, as I said earlier on. I do think NHS England have done actually a very good job here. There's an awful lot of material out there. There's stuff from NHS Digital. There's when you go onto those pages that they've put up, there are links to the BMA who've done documents around this thing. So there is an awful lot of information out there, and my intention this morning isn't to just sort of regurgitate too much of that. I'm really going to point you towards it. So the purpose of the presentation, really, good old aims and objectives, is to hopefully raise your awareness. I'm pretty sure you guys are all aware of this already, just to kind of reinforce that, and then to point you in the direction of where the detailed stuff is, because there's an awful lot of stuff out there, and I appreciate you all won't need all of it. It's a case of just having a look through and finding the bits that you need, so to ensure that you're aware and your staff are aware. And I think that's the absolute key to this, and is the single most important bit, ensuring that everybody knows that this is coming along and how it's going to impact on the way they do their job after the 1st of November. In light of that, I would say those of you who've been around a while will know that we've been here before with a number of major sort of national projects, thinking back to Care Data and various other ones that have been pulled at the last minute. This one itself was due to go, I believe, in April, if I remember correctly, and has been postponed September, and now we've got the final date of the 1st of November. I would say, I can't actually remember what I said about Care Data. I don't know if I was prophesizing doom back then, but my assessment of this one is that this will go ahead. I don't see this being pulled and being postponed any further past the 1st of November. And I think what makes this program significantly different from the likes of Care Data is that there isn't a huge groundswell of public opinion, if you like, against it. If you think back to some of the other major data projects that the NHS have done, GPs, certain GPs, I would say, and certain individuals with specific interests around these issues have been able to kind of motivate, certainly using social media, motivate a groundswell of opinion against what the NHS were planning to do. And say, we think back to Care Data being the obvious one, but the GP extraction system that was going to go ahead at the start of the year as well was another, where it was described as an NHS data grab and all these things that they terms that they use. And then, of course, once you get on the wrong side of the Daily Mail, pretty much nothing's ever going to happen. So those were pulled back in the day. My assessment is that this one hasn't got that, because there isn't a groundswell of opinion against it. Actually, if you ask most patients and explain to them what it is, that they're probably, I guess the reality is majority of them are fairly neutral on it, and probably quite a few are quite keen on the idea. and there are very few who would be against it, and it's hard to see why a patient would actually be vociferously objecting to this. To some extent, if they're that objecting to it, then they just don't use it. So my assessment is that this will go ahead on the 1st of November. And as I say, the main thing is you guys need to be aware of it and prepared for it. So let's run through some of the basics that we've got and that we know about so far. So terminology, first of all, I think the web pages still call it this accelerating access to online records. That's
on the 1st of November, the implement. Yeah, I read it again. Yeah.
Hello. Sorry, can I just ask you to stay? If everyone stays on mute, that'd be great. If you've got a specific question as we go through it, a really burning topic, absolutely, just jump in and kind of shout and ask me to stop, and we can have a conversation. But if not, we'll wait to the end and we'll do question and answers and probably have a bit more of a discussion at the end. So the presentation isn't going to be too long. There's not a whole lot of new stuff I'm telling you guys. It's just that kind of awareness, and I'll go through some of the basics, and then we can have a discussion at the end if that's okay. Fantastic. So the Accelerating Access to Online Records, that was the original name for this project, and it's still the name. If you want to search on Google or some of that will actually bring up the proper NHS digital pages for it. It still has that name in the background. They use different terminology. I've seen this one being used more frequently, the citizen access, the idea that we're giving citizens, and the use of that term as opposed to patients to mean everybody, not just someone who is actually being treated. I guess I don't really know if there's a difference between patients and citizens. In general terms, I think they're interchangeable, but I have seen NHS Digital using this concept of the term citizens access to services. And essentially that's what it is. It's access to the patient records through the NHS app, and it's building on a whole range of services that will be available through the NHS app. Now, of course, by default, most people have got the NHS app if you have a smartphone, because you needed it for your COVID pass. So it's by default, because it had that. That's kind of, I think the numbers of people who downloaded and who had access to the NHS app went up hugely during COVID when it became the place where your COVID pass was being held. And so the NHS are building on that, I think, and making more and more services available, including and this is going to go off on a totally different tangent, but I'll not go too far down that route, but including the ability for patients to enter data into a record through the NHS app. Before you all fall off your chairs, I'll talk about this on another presentation, I promise. It's actually something that I spent most of yesterday looking at. So there is the ability in the NHS app, and hopefully most of you got this. This is the other thing I find as I'm talking about this to people. You should be able to see this because we're all patients. So if you have the NHS app, you can see it yourselves. You can see this stuff that we're talking about. You can see how this works because you'll see it coming through on your version of the app. So you can see that you can enter data into the NHS app, and that can flow through to the patient record. And there are some issues around that we need to sort out, which I was trying to do yesterday. So those of you who are on the call, let's not go down that route today. We'll leave that one for another day because it's there are some interesting concepts. However, getting back to this, the record will be available through NHS app. It's important to note other systems as well. I'll mention that in a moment, but predominantly that's the idea. Right, I've got, as I said, a lot of this stuff is available through NHS England. I'm going to, on a couple of presentations, on a couple of slides here, I'm actually simply going to regurgitate some of the stuff that they've already put out. Because actually, as I said, unlike the deceased record stuff, which is absolutely woefully inadequate and pathetic and all that other sort of things, which I mentioned to you the other day on the presentation, this stuff is actually very good. I think the team involved here have put together some good information. So I'm going to, a couple of times, I'll just be regurgitating what they've done. Now, I've got a quick list of these are their good things. This is why do you think patient access is a good thing? And I would say this isn't probably the forum to be discussing the rights and wrongs of this either. This is what it is, and this is what's coming through. It apparently increases patients' feelings of autonomy and understanding. I think the understanding of the health and ability to self-care is really important. As I said, the self-care bit, there are a number of logical steps here when you're starting to produce giving patients access to their record. It's actually logical to allow them to be able to enter their own data, whether that be fitness type stuff, whether that be details of ongoing conditions that may be long-term care that they may be self-medicating for, and just that sort of general wellness type of thing. It supports patients prepared for appointments by acting as a written reminder and a record of previous interactions. I think this is really important. There are, I guess, there are certain patients who struggle with this, who go to see, who have appointments, and I'm thinking absolutely personally here of my own elderly parents who will go and have an appointment, come away, and sometimes struggle to remember what was said, certainly if there've been quite detailed discussions around things, and they would find, to be able to review what was actually said, and what they were told, I think would be quite useful. So that's one of the things that they think this is a good thing to do. Reduce the need for patients to contact practice to get test results. So the test results is interesting. This is the basic test result where it's saying, yep, you're fine, there's nothing, we don't need to do anything else. Those sorts of results can just pop into your NHS app. And I know from my own personal experience that has happened to me recently. Yep, that's fine. I got a result saying normal, no further action needed. That's great. And I don't need a phone call. I don't need someone to be sat trying to contact me or anything like that. I can just see it because it just pops up. Yeah, and I know this is the one that you're all going to say, no, we don't like this one. Increases data quality within patient records by enabling patients to flag if they think that there are inaccuracies in their record. There's a clear difficulty with this. I mean, the concept there is fantastic. Of course, we all want good data quality, and if you see something wrong, yes, if it's been recorded, I don't know, my medical things here are very simplistic, and I totally appreciate that. But let's use a little scenario where I go in and I have a consultation with a professional, and I say, oh, I've got this problem with my left knee. I'm a runner, and my left knee's been really just getting worse and worse, more and more sore. Do you think you can do anything about it? Next day, I look at my record and I see that somehow, whatever reason, it's been recorded as that I went and had an appointment and discussed my right knee. And somehow it's just been basically a point of fact has been recorded inaccurately. And yes, great for data quality. I could make a note. Hopefully I wouldn't ring up the practice. I'd send a message through the NHS app perhaps to them to say that this has been recorded inaccurately. It was my left knee I came and talked about, not my right one. And could they just amend that and fix it? We get into very different scenarios when you're talking about people who disagree with decisions, who disagree with with the content of what was being recorded, and I appreciate that's going to cause issues. I suspect, certainly in terms of people ringing up, wanting to talk about what was in their record. It's one of those where there are good and bad things. I suspect. It's what it is. I'm afraid. As I say, we're not here to discuss the rights and wrongs of it. This is just the awareness. This is what's going to happen, I think. And I think it's a reality that you are going to get more patients ringing up, questioning what's in their record. Now, what this is designed to do is to make it, they can point out inaccuracies of fact, which will help the data quality. However, it's not designed really to be allowing them to be having constant discussions around what's get written in. But we probably know, you guys will know that you have certain patients who will do that. So moving on, let's look at a couple of other things. What have we got here? So it's default access then to the full GP record from the 1st of November. Important that we know that what we're enabling on the 1st of November will be access through the NHS app for patients to any data that gets entered after the 1st of November. Okay, so it's prospective data that's going to be entered into the record. So at the moment, you don't need to go back and look at other stuff. This is what we're doing with this project here. On the 1st of November, it will be default access to the full record of what's entered going forward. And what it says on it's the full record. It's letters, it's text, it's everything that gets put into the GP record. It'll be available through the NHS app, and obviously that's what the NHS are focusing on, but also other systems. So our understanding is if you have essentially the System 1 app, they have their own online access, so you can access it on a web page, that the access will be available through those systems as well. But obviously the NHS are promoting the NHS app, but any other system that gives patients access to their record, this will apply to as well. Yeah, everyone's out there saying, do I have to do this? You do, I'm afraid. It's a contractual obligation. It's actually been in the contract for some time, that you give a certain percentage and that you should have been increasing. I can't remember the figures, but again, it's on the NHS guidance page. I think it's pretty much near the top as to why you have to do this. It's been an obligation, say, for a while, and I think they've done it this way in terms of you can't switch it off. It is what it is. It's going to be default access. System suppliers are going to tweak their systems, and then it'll just happen. And say it's a contractual obligation. In respect of that, there's one thing I would say, and we'll talk in a little bit about redacting information and so on. No, hang on. Sorry, I'm going to go off too far off a tangent there. I just remember I actually put in a line here on the presentation, so I'll leave that bit till I get to it. Oh, for goodness sake, it's there. Right. Apologies. It's this bit here. So I want to make the point here that you're all aware that a subject access request is a specific legal process that's carried out under the Data Protection Act, and it's described in the Act, and it's a very specific thing. That makes sense. It's a legally binding process, and you have to follow it. The law requires you to follow it in terms of giving someone, it's their right of access to all the information that's held on them. You provide it to them, and there are a couple of exemptions in there that the law sets out what the exemptions are: third party and serious harm. And if you don't get that correct, then you're in, I don't want to overstate it by saying you're breaking the law, but essentially you would be, because the law describes what a subject access request is, how you do it, and what has to happen. And you have to follow that because that's what the law says. Online access is an NHS process that you're required to follow as part of your contract with the NHS in terms of the way you manage people's personal information and personal records. There is a difference there, and the way I think it's important, probably best to think of it, is that if you get it wrong, the sanctions, if you get a subject access request wrong and you withhold too much information that you shouldn't have done, essentially, as I said, you've breached the law, and you could be required, or you would be required if you were challenged, to rectify that and provide the information. For online access, if you get it wrong, you've kind of breached the process, if you like. You haven't broken the law. You should still, you could potentially be challenged by the patient, and you'd review it again and say, okay, hang on, yeah, perhaps you didn't get that right. We'll just fix it. So what I'm trying to say in a roundabout way, I guess, is that you can afford to be more cautious. No, you can err on the side of caution, if you like, on the online access bit. So if you're unsure about something, in a subject access request, you'd have to be certain because it's a legal process. With the online access, if you're uncertain, you can afford to say, do you know what, let's just be a bit, we'll not make this available. And we'll talk about that in a moment, how you make information either available or not available to the patient view. I think you can afford to say, okay, almost just because you've had that thought, well, I'm really not sure about this. If you're not sure, then err on the side of caution and don't make it available. But obviously you need to perhaps have a bit more question about it and so on. But it's not a legal thing. I hope that makes sense. I'm not. I don't want to kind of. I know I've gone a bit. So I'm just trying to ensure that there are two different things here, and you can afford to be slightly more cautious with the online access, because it is just essentially an NHS process, if you like, around how you manage the records. There's an interesting kind of concept here that links these two together, and I think there is a hope potentially that once you get full online access to all of your records, and I think the potential is that will come in the not too distant future, that in itself should enable or should reduce the number of subject access requests that you get, because essentially you'll be able to say to someone, well, there, it's all there anyway. We don't, you don't need to ask, because actually you've already got it. It's available to you on an ongoing basis, and if you've done your redaction fully, the redaction is actually the same. Therefore, you could say to an individual, if they've got full online access, and obviously that would include their full history as well, essentially that they have got the provisions of a subject access request and that they've got all the information. You need to be slightly careful with that, because that's, even now, that isn't true. We know that the overwhelming majority of people who ask for a subject access request want their medical record. That's what they're talking about. But as many of you out there will know, there are other bits as well, and sometimes these other bits, things like CCTV, telephone recordings, emails that are specifically about that patient. So there are sometimes other things that sit outside the medical record as well that you would need to consider. But for quite a large number of people, it may be that it reduces the number of subject access requests that you get. Okay, this is the one bit that slightly annoys me from NHS England. If you're on some of the calls that they did around April and leading through when the whole thing first came up, you'll remember that the question was asked, what will practices need to do locally? And the answer was absolutely nothing. The systems will be totally configured by the suppliers. You won't need to do a single thing. That hasn't turned out to be quite the case. There is some system configuration required. And as of this morning, I think there are 34 practices that are outstanding who still need to do a little bit of system tweaking, should I say. And the requirement is there. So when you get this presentation later on, when it's on the portal, you'll be able to go onto that link and have a look. And what I would say, our DOTS team within N3I, we've got the actual list, because from the back end, NHS Digital can pull off a report, so we know which 34 practices there are. And you should have been contacted by Emma, I think, who's from the team who's doing this. She should have sent you something out over the last couple of days that says you just need to do this, and it'll be that link that tells you what you need to do. And we're going to run the report again, and hopefully we'll be contacting those of you who still haven't made that. And I think it's a fairly small tweak you need to do to the system, but it's slightly annoying, because they originally did say that you wouldn't have to do anything, and now it turns out you do. But I don't think it's a major thing. Okay. So as it stands now, patients can request online access and can request for their history to see what's in their whole historical record. Now, I know this causes a bit of a resource issue, because you do need to check back around the stuff that can be redacted, third-party information, and the serious harm test. But that's the thing. So patients can request their history. Don't quote me on this bit, but I suspect, and I think you probably saw there was an article in the Pulse magazine just this week to say that once we've got over this this hurdle of getting everyone to have online access to their current information, I suspect that the history bit will come in. I think Pulse thought would be within 6 months or so. I wouldn't challenge that. I think that's probably reasonable. So I think that it's going to potentially come soon, that you will have also access to the history as well, to the full information. And logically, that would make sense. And I'm not at all underestimating the amount of work that's going to create for practices. That's going to be quite a very significant piece of work. But from a management of records point of view, it's quite a logical thing to do. Which just brings up the one kind of sticky bit around the current situation. Well, I mean, the situation, sorry, from the 1st of November. The one thing that hasn't quite been, or they haven't quite got right, or been able to sort out, is that when you get access, when you get online access from the 1st of November, if you then move to a different GP practice, that online access that you will have had becomes part of the history at the new practice, and therefore you don't get automatic access to it. Your online access will start again, but only from the stuff that goes forward at your new practice. And that's seen as a bit, well, I already had access to this information, and now just because I've moved practice, I've lost access to it. Obviously, the patient can request access, and the new practice could potentially grant them it, but it's just a bit of a quirk of the system that your access would be removed after the 1st of November if you change practices. And obviously that may potentially apply to you if you're getting people coming into you who are new to your practice after the 1st November, who will be saying to you, hang on, why can't I see the information that like yesterday I could see? But that's just it's a quirk of the system that's likely to be addressed by the fact that people will have full access in the not too distant future, I suspect. Okay, let's look at some of the issues then, and some of the things that clearly people have raised over the past few months. And I do think that the pause in the rollout of the project, which we had in the summer, which was when specifically safeguarding issues were being raised, has enabled them to put out an awful lot of information around this. So there are loads of things now, and on the final slide, I've got a load of resources. Not to me. I'm not overburdening you with stuff, but one specifically which is about redacting and making things not visible to the online view. There's a page there from NHS Digital which has not just guidance but actually has little video clips. It says this is what you do. You click this button here. You do this. You do this. And I love that sort of stuff. You know, it's online. You can actually see, and the guy talks you through just by doing that. It'll mean it won't happen there. So they're really useful. And there's clips to cover EMIS and System 1. And I think that's the sort of stuff that's come out of this review of how do you address the safeguarding bits? How do you ensure that information that shouldn't be visible online isn't made visible? So that's and I think they're really useful. And the links to that page will be at the end of the slides. Third-party data and serious harm tests. These two are pretty much unchanged from the subject access request section. So if you go onto the IG portal, which again is essentially where this presentation will be, where I put all my stuff, and then go onto the documents, there are 2 documents there that relate to third-party data and to the serious harm test. So that they're already there. They apply to subject access requests. They actually, as you'll know from the other day, they apply to deceased records as well, and they apply to this, and they're just fairly straightforward tests that you need to do. And so there are guidance documents, both nationally and on the local system, about how you do those. As I said, there's the little video clips about how to redact information and ensure that it's not visible online. Ghost appointments are something that on one of the video clips, there's a GP who did a pilot site of this, and he's over in Manchester, and I found this quite interesting. So he talks about creating ghost appointments, and it's the one area where I think there is still there is still concerns, and I know many of you will have concerns, and it relates to abusive relationships and where there is potential coercion in terms of giving access to someone else. So if you're in a relationship where one partner it's a dominant, controlling partner, and perhaps requires you to show things such as your banking and potentially your medical app as well, that could create an issue. Certainly if there are other things in the mix there, such as domestic violence, and you need to go and have an appointment about that, where your partner is going to require to see that appointment. So there's a concept that the GP talks about where you can create, in all our systems now, you can create a ghost appointment. And that would be where someone in this situation goes to see a GP about domestic violence. When they're in the appointment, they're able to, obviously, GP realizes what the appointment's about and is able to create a ghost appointment that says, I don't know, something like problem sleeping or a sore wrist or anything at all. They can put in, and that's the appointment that would appear on the patient record. However, in the background, there's the actual appointment where the patient was discussing domestic violence and that type of thing. So again, that's in one of those video clips. It is quite an interesting concept. There is one thing, however, that he does point out, because the other thing he says where this could be useful would be in situations where perhaps teenage girls are going to get contraceptives and birth control. If you go for that appointment, you could again make that into a ghost appointment. However, the bit that is still visible that you can't change would be the prescription element. So you would still see that the individual have been prescribed, as I say, the pill perhaps, and they're working on how that can change. But I think that's more complex. But the appointment bit can certainly be done. And there's a whole clip, as I say, that discusses that. So these issues are clearly there, and I think the project team have certainly recognised them and have made significant changes to the system and to and have done things that will help you, certainly enable you to redact information and look at the issues around safeguarding, how you can keep that information appropriately. Okay, I realize that some people will still have questions about this. We can discuss it at the end. If there's a very specific query you want me to raise, we can do that. There are still presentations going on, and there is a lot of stuff out there focusing on this area in itself. If you look on the main online page, about halfway down, it goes off to specifically talk about safeguarding. That's it, and then there's stuff from the BMA and so on as well. Okay, right. This is another little bit I cribbed off the site this morning. Just I think it's kind of a summary almost, if you like. So as we all know this. The TBP and EMIS, which is what the only two systems we have in this area, are ready to go on the 1st of November. There are some other systems in use in other areas that aren't quite ready yet. So that's why they've made this point. So 1st of November is TBP and EMIS systems, which for us is all of our systems. Yeah, again, that's just what we've already said. Free text, letters and documents will be available on the online account. Yeah, everyone, this is, as I say, is that awareness thing. People must be aware. All your staff have got to be aware of this and know how to manage changes. As it says here, ensuring that sensitive information is redacted, made invisible from the patient view as it's entered into the system. Now, when it talks in here, the one thing I haven't actually quite been able to get an answer to when I've asked the question is essentially how soon does this stuff become available? So if I go for an appointment in the morning with my GP, and I discuss a number of things and come away from that, how soon does that actually appear? Is that appearing real time on my, literally would I be able to walk out the practice and call up the appointment and see that it's there and see what we put? So as the GP, as it's entered into the system, or is it like an overnight update and so on? So I haven't got an answer to that, but it's pretty much going to be there or thereabouts. It's going to be fairly soon. It's not a sense that it's going to take a long time. So, as I said, very rare circumstances where it may be inappropriate to give a patient access to their record. There are situations that you may deem to be inappropriate. Again, that's documented in the in some of the guidance. I think it's pretty unusual. Okay, yeah, that was the question. That's it. Once it's entered or filed, is it immediate? And as I said, it doesn't give access to historic record stuff unless it's been individual. So people can ask now, and you can individually authorize them to have it. That isn't coming by default at the moment. And this is important. I know this question has been asked quite a few times. Patients don't see admin tasks or communications between staff. It's just a basic view of what's in there in the record itself. Resources. Okay, this is, first of all, is a list of a number of websites and resources that you've got. The other thing I wanted to mention in resources, I think, and we have covered it to some extent, is that I expect that you will, certainly in the initial days, initial weeks potentially, be getting people ringing up and requesting, I've just seen this, I've just seen this, what does this mean? Bear in mind, perhaps not initially straight away, because again, it's not historical, it's from 1st of November, it's just new stuff that gets put in. So you may get a few questions. Your staff on reception and so on will probably need to be aware how to answer those. Some thoughts about how you're going to deal with those questions where people come in. You may want to ask them to say, put it in an email. You don't want more phone calls. That's what I'm trying to say. Try to move people away from taking up time on the phone and say, okay, write down what your issue is. If you feel there's something inaccurate in your record, write it down, I'll put it in an email to us and send, and then we'll have, when we have time, we'll go through it and have a look at it. Right, so I forget which one. See, there's only 2 or 3. Let me put them all on. Oops, there we go. There's only 3 there actually. When you get the access to this presentation itself, have a look at those. They're the main pages. I think, yeah, the final one there, the events at NHS England, are the presentations that they're doing. There are specific ones for practice managers, for admin staff. They're really useful to go on. You don't have to, but if you feel you need a little bit more information, they're still running, and they're still going to be running through into November as well. I looked on the page this morning, and they are really good. As I say, I think this is, I said from the start, this is one of those areas where I think there is plenty of information and guidance out there to answer all the questions that I suspect you will have. Just a case of needing to go and have a look for it. And finally, that link there takes you to a readiness checklist, but you had to go on to, it was a bit of a faff. So anyway, I've copied the checklist down and I put it as a document there. So when you get access again to this presentation, you should be able to open that document there, and it's a checklist. Kind of, have you done this? And there are 10 or 20 things, perhaps not as many as that, but there are a list of things that you need to have considered, which really absolutely come down to the most fundamental one is raising awareness, ensuring that everybody is aware, and everyone knows this is coming, and everyone kind of knows what they should be expecting. What patients are going to be seeing, and again, you can. Oh, I did meant to mention this. You can set up a test, so you can get a test patient, and on one of the pages, one of those guidance pages, it talks about how to do that, so that you can see how it works, see the patient's view, if you like. Obviously, I suspect most of you have got the NHS app yourselves, so you can have a look at your view, but at each practice you can have a test patient, and then you'd be able to, again, to see exactly what the test patient sees, and you could try redacting stuff and put something out there and see what they see, try putting a document on and so on. So that might be something useful. You might want to get one of the team to do that perhaps, and then just as part of the briefing to staff, you can show, look, this is what people will see from the other side. But also I suspect your staff will be seeing that. You guys can see it as well yourselves. So okay, I think that's all I've got to talk about now. Let me just stop the presentation bit. And has anyone got any questions? Would anyone like to ask anything? I can. I'll do this. If I get a really difficult question, I'm going to be passing on to the project team. But if there's anything I can't answer, more than happy to do that for you. But their details are on those web pages. There are a couple of contact details to get through to the main project. And again, I think when I emailed them the other day on the main implementation contact page, you get an email straight back that says you'll get an answer within 2 days, and they did that. As I can't fault them for that. They do get back quickly to you, and answer the questions that you've got. That certainly was my experience anyway. Okay. Well, if there are no questions, I'll call that a day. Thank you very much for coming along. As I said from the very beginning, I can't emphasize enough, the issue here really is about getting that information out to everybody within your practice. Richard, you want to ask something?
Yeah, please, Barry. So there's 2 things. I put one of them in the chat. A few weeks back, I attended one of the earlier adopter delivered webinars, and they showed a template. They demonstrated the use of a template that's within the clinical system that they use to record their decisions about when access is restricted and the reasons for it. They did say that had been made available, but I can't find anywhere where we can get a hold of that template. So I don't know whether that's something you're aware of, or whether you know where we can get access to that, because it would be really helpful, actually.
Yeah, no, it sounds like something that would be helpful, Richard. I'm afraid I haven't. It's not something I've heard of, and I've not seen reference to it. I will take up on your behalf and behalf of the group, I will ask the implementation team this morning. I'll send them a message saying, you know, I can see your question in the chat now. I'll put that to them. If it's there, I'm sure they'll get back quickly to me, and I'll put that out to everybody. But yeah, that does sound like it would be a useful thing to have.
Yeah, great, thanks. And the other part of the question is really just to check my understanding. So there's this 104 code that we can apply. And again, during the early adopter webinar, they had some searches that we could import into the system, which we did and we ran. And it identified quite a large number of patients. And these were potentially the ones that lacked capacity. So in total, for us as a practice, it was over 1,600 patients. So that's a huge amount of work to go through those patients and contact them. I've since read some of the guidance that said you need to contact the patients and tell them if they're not going to have access, when you'll be able to get back to them and confirm whether or not they're going to have access. So just doing the maths, if we went with that 1,600 number and we were going to do so many records per day, we'd need to do 10 a day, and it'd take 6 months. And it's really just whether that conversation's been had and what sort of time frame other practices might be taking to approach it. I am right in thinking that once you've applied that 104 code, you need to review the record. And then if you're restricting access, you need to contact the patient and tell them why. Is that right?
I can't remember the detail. Richard, I'll have a look at the guidance and see if I can pick that out. I'm not sure about contacting them to tell them and what that would achieve if most people weren't going to be accessing it anyway. I'll need to, Richard. I'll need to have a look at that and send something out. I'll take those two things off. I'll research them, and then I'll get answers out to you guys. In the chat, I can see Vicky's asked, will lab reports and documents that come through provisional be viewable? No. So anything you receive through the system from another organization, you have to look at, review, and then put it onto you have to kind of click it through to go onto the online viewable bit. Nothing should be viewable by the patient that you haven't approved first. So they won't see anything that comes directly in, such as test results and so on, without it coming to you guys first, and then a review and take some action to make it visible on the online record. Okay. Right, if we're all done, thanks very much, guys, for coming along. Names of staff will be available. Yeah, Victoria, interesting question. It is in the same way as a subject access request. Names of staff aren't classed as third-party data. Unless there's a specific reason. So unless there's a real threat or potential threat to a member of staff from a patient, then the default is that the names of staff are available. Yeah, that's it. You can't redact them on the basis of being third-party data. Staff names need to be available. Michelle, do you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it obviously goes back to the capacity thing, but do you know the best interest as well, if it's not in a patient's best interest to have the notes from previous, let's say, mental health involvement, but they've been discharged, can we still make that decision that it will be in there because of past history? Or would we have to refer back and just get confirmation from mental health or not?
The redaction bit is around serious health, so you can't really redact information because it's not in their best interest. The test for redacting information is, would it cause them serious harm by making it available to them? So it's quite a high test. I mean, certainly you should, or you can go and check with other organizations. If you're unsure about anything, like I said, I would err on the side of caution. Don't make it available, and potentially go back and check and take the view of other organizations. But once you've received information that you're putting onto the medical record, that's your responsibility, and you need to make that decision of whether you want to make it visible or not. But the test there is serious harm, as opposed to just not in their best interest potentially.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Right. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. As I say, this presentation will be on the IG portal as soon as I can. I'll whiz it across now to our web guy, and please have a look at those links and see if there's anything. And if you've got any queries at all, just come back to me. Or obviously, if you want to contact directly through to the program team, all their details are on there as well. But if you want to come through me and do it, that's absolutely fine as well. Okay, thank you all very much. Thanks.